Space diving is a thrill seeker's dream and a nightmare for those with a fear of heights. Imagine diving from the edge of space, from a height so high that the curvature of the Earth is visible and the black void of space is all around you. The rush of adrenaline as you free fall at supersonic speeds, the wind rushing past your face, and the overwhelming feeling of being completely alone, suspended in the void of space. This is what space diving promises, an experience like no other, pushing the limits of human endurance and fear. Are you ready to take the leap? Not just yet. We're gonna let you take a leap of faith. In this video, we're gonna talk about everything there is about space diving. Only the wildest of minds could ever think of diving from space, leaving their life to a parachute. The concept of space diving, or the idea of an individual jumping from a high altitude in the Earth's atmosphere and free falling through space, has been around for many years and has been popularized in media. But why don't we float like the ISS or become a beautiful ring like Saturn? This is simply due to the physical laws and orbital mechanics principles. The gravity of the Earth exerts a pull on all objects near its surface, including spacecraft and people. A spacecraft must reach high enough altitude and have enough sideways velocity to counteract the gravitational pull in order to achieve and maintain orbit. This sideways velocity is known as orbital velocity, and it's typically around 17,500 miles per hour for low Earth orbit. When a person jumps from a high altitude balloon or spacecraft, they'll initially be in free fall and will feel weightless. They'll eventually fall back to the Earth's surface, and if they do not have the necessary sideways velocity to counteract the Earth's gravity. This principle was demonstrated by Felix Baumgartner's jump from a high altitude balloon in 2012. Baumgartner was unable to achieve orbit despite reaching an altitude of more than 24 miles due to a lack of sideways velocity. As a result, he fell back to Earth in free fall and eventually deployed his parachute to safely return to the surface. So, to remain in space, a spacecraft or person must have sufficient sideways velocity to counteract the pull of the Earth's gravity and maintain an orbit. A balloon or any other object without this velocity will eventually fall back to the Earth. But then a space diving person basically a meteor at this point, and so why don't they burn? We're glad you thought about it. If a person were to attempt a space dive, they would need to be protected from the intense heat generated by atmospheric re-entry. The Earth's atmosphere acts as a barrier to slow down incoming objects, including spacecraft and people. As an object enters the atmosphere, it encounters increasing levels of air resistance, which creates friction and heats up the surface of the object. This heat can quickly reach extremely high temperatures, making it necessary to have a heat shield in place to protect the person. In the case of space diving, a specially designed heat-resistant suit or other protective device would likely be required to protect the person from the heat generated during re-entry. The specifics of such a device would depend on a variety of factors, including the altitude of the dive, the speed of re-entry, and the atmospheric conditions of the time of the dive. The development of suitable protective technology would be a major challenge for any attempt at a space dive, and it is currently an active area of research and development. A futuristic spacesuit in development will transport tomorrow's high-altitude adventurer from the total vacuum of outer space to the searing heat of atmospheric re-entry, then down to the planet's surface for a pinpoint landing. Juxtopia LLC and Solar System Express, both of Baltimore, Maryland, are combining their respective talents to assemble the RL Mark VI space diving ensemble, hardware that until now could only be appreciated by a true superhero. With this collaboration, future space travelers will be able to exit a spacecraft in low Earth orbit, re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, and safely return to the ground, both in emergency situations and for recreational purposes. Space diving could be a new tourism, but currently it's not possible. It is currently not possible due to the significant technological and infrastructure requirements involved. A number of challenges must be overcome in order to make space diving a viable form of tourism, including the development of suitable protective gear to protect individuals from the extreme conditions of a dive, as well as spacecraft or other vehicles capable of reaching high altitudes and safely returning individuals to the surface. In addition to these technical challenges, there's also numerous regulatory and legal hurdles that must be addressed in order to make space diving a form of commercial tourism. Governments around the world have yet to establish clear regulations and guidelines for commercial space activities, and it's likely to be several years, if not decades, before these issues are fully resolved and space diving becomes a viable form of tourism. That being said, space tourism is an area of growing interest, and it's likely that commercial space companies will continue to develop new and innovative ways for people to experience space. Whether space diving will ultimately become a form of tourism remains to be seen, but it is certainly an intriguing concept that has captured the imagination of many people. But then, despite the risks involved, there's a man who did it. Joe Kittinger is a retired U.S. Air Force officer and veteran of the Vietnam War. He's the best known for his record-breaking high-altitude parachute jump, which he performed on August 16, 1960 as a part of a military research program. Kittinger's jump took place from a helium balloon at an altitude of 102,800 meters, making him the first person to reach the edge of space using a parachute. During the jump, he reached a maximum speed of 1,220 kilometers per hour and was in free fall for over 4 minutes before deploying his parachute. The jump was part of a series of high-altitude parachute jumps performed by the US military in the 1950s and 1960s as a part of their research into high-altitude bailouts and survival techniques for military pilots. Kittinger's jump remains one of the most famous and widely known space dives in history, and it has inspired numerous imitators and copycat jumps over the years. Kittinger himself went on to have a long and distinguished career in the US military and later as a civilian pilot, and he continues to be recognized as one of the pioneers of high altitude and space diving. That inspired many people, and they began space diving too. Some of them are: number 1, Felix Baumgartner. In 2012, Austrian skydiver Felix Baumgartner became the first person to perform a space dive from a stratospheric balloon. He jumped from an altitude of 39 kilometers and reached a maximum speed of 1,357 kilometers per hour during his freefall. Number 2, Alan Eustace is an American computer scientist and engineer, but he's known for his record-breaking freefall skydive from the stratosphere in 2014. Alan made headlines when he broke the world record for the highest altitude freefall jump. He was lifted to a height of 135,889 feet, which is about 41,419 meters above the Earth's surface by a helium-filled balloon, and then he descended to Earth using a specially designed spacesuit and parachute. He broke the previous record set by Felix Baumgartner in 2012. Number 3, Joseph William Kittinger is a retired United States Air Force colonel and a former fighter pilot. He's perhaps best known for his participation in Project Excelsior and a series of high-altitude parachute jumps conducted by the United States Air Force in the 1950s and 1960s. On August 16, 1960, Kittinger set a world record for the highest parachute jump when he jumped from a helium balloon at an altitude of 102,800 feet. During the jump, Kittinger reached a top speed of 614 miles per hour, becoming the first person to break the sound barrier without an aircraft. Number 4, Nick Piantanita was an American amateur parachutist who attempted to set a world record for the highest parachute jump in the early 1960s. His goal was to jump from an altitude of 120 feet, which could have broken the altitude record set by the Soviet Air Force pilot Pavel Popovich in 1962. Piantanita made 3 attempts to break the record, the first 2 of which were unsuccessful. On his 3rd attempt on February 2, 1966, he successfully ascended to an altitude of 123,500 feet in a helium balloon. However, during his descent, his pressure suit malfunctioned and he lost consciousness. The lack of oxygen left him brain damaged, and he died 3 months later in a hospital without ever regaining consciousness. In conclusion, space diving is a relatively new and extremely challenging form of extreme sport that involves jumping from high altitudes, typically above the Earth's atmosphere, and reaching speeds in excess of over 1,000 kilometers. While space diving has yet to become a mainstream form of tourism, it's gaining popularity among thrill seekers and adrenaline junkies who are looking for a new and exciting way to experience the thrill of flight. However, due to the inherent dangers and technical requirements involved, space diving remains a niche activity that's only accessible to a select few with the necessary skills, experience, and equipment. Nevertheless, as technology continues to advance and the sport continues to evolve, it's possible that space diving could become more accessible and popular as a form of tourism in the future. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more.